Good morning. Welcome to the speaking booth. This is the first episode, or the pilot if you'd like. And today I will be talking about the education system. Its flaws, its basically everything to do with it, the semantics and sorts. And today I'm joined by Taimur and Sajjad. Taimur is a sociology teacher as well as a part-time writer for the Express Tribune. Sajjad is the dean of Bayview College and something to do with economics.
I've always been an economics teacher.
An economics teacher. Basically, my intention for talking about the education system was, in a sense, to enlighten more or less some people who could retain that information. So my first question would be, do you think that today's education system causes a halt in mental progression of students in general? Sajjad.
I would say there are two things. Firstly, the way education is delivered, I have observed that in many cases it does halt curiosity, the ability of students to question. It is more targeted towards giving them notes, giving them shortcuts, which are surely going to get them a good grade, but it is killing, curiosity. I mean, this is what I have observed, that students have become more and more incurious over time. That's one thing. The other thing I also feel is that there is some very irrational commercialization. I'm not against commercialization in education per se, but I am obviously against irrational commercialization, where I personally feel that if Cambridge, for example, would revisit the situation and see the market for O-levels and A-levels, I would more say A-levels, they would realize that a chunk of students are actually not eligible to do A-levels because there is no criteria, there is no eligibility. A student who has not achieved a minimum of, let's say, a B or a C in math, who hasn't achieved a good grade in sciences, can go to a new school which is looking for students, and they would be given sciences even if they have D's and E's in them. So clearly, if it wasn't for these practices, the market for A-level would probably be half of its actual size. If suppose Cambridge made it a rule that someone who's doing hard sciences cannot progress to A-level hard sciences unless they have a minimum level of achievement in O-level sciences, or to do economics and physics, you must have a minimum level of achievement in math, O-level math, or maybe even add math for that matter. Right now, there are people who are getting D's and E's in O-levels, and they're getting into A-level schools and doing any combinations they like, and there is absolutely no check on them. Mm-hmm. So that's not the question where the mental progression is being halted. That's a point where the foundation stone is not there for a student to progress.
Absolutely. I feel like when it works in a lot of other cases where I've witnessed myself that people who get D's and E's in sciences and O-levels, their go-to after O-levels is that they take up humanities, which is sort of a last resort for students who get D's and E's. If they can't pass simple O-level by Cambridge's or by anyone's account, by simple sciences they can't pass, they're given a subject by our schooling systems that the schooling system thinks that they can easily comprehend or work through, which I think is just not okay. Because if someone wants to pursue sciences, granted that their mental wavelength isn't at the same as everyone else's, because no student can be the same. Everyone's perception of the subject, everyone's way to understand the subject is going to be independent of its own. And I feel like no student is catered to that. What do you think?
Well, Hassan, we have to remember over here that unfortunately, the social sciences and humanities are looked down upon as the last rung of the ladder.
Yeah.
So if you don't get into sciences, if you don't get into commerce, so you have subjects like sociology and psychology, and unfortunately even literature made out for you.
Yeah.
So as Sajjad mentioned, this whole commodification of education has really harmed the system within itself. it has not only killed that creativity within the students, but it has also limited the intellectual capacity of the students to evaluate themselves. At the same time, this hierarchy of subjects that we have, it has just made the social sciences unimportant. And that is what we see a lot of doctors out there, engineers out there, but hardly we can name social scientists in Pakistan.
Exactly.
We can't talk about sociologists in Pakistan. We don't have any psychologists in Pakistan. We don't have that much of research going on even at the university level in these subjects. How many universities offer a major in sociology? How many good universities offer a major in psychology? So that's the whole commodification of education, where education की जो intrinsic value है वो निकल गई है.
Absolutely.
Its intrinsic value for knowledge itself, that has died down.
Yeah. I feel like more or less the end game for the education system is to basically make tiny pillars out of people so that they can just stand there and make sure that society functions continuously. Because the factory model of education, when started out, was to make kids understand the way a machine works and then go out and make that machine work that way. And the same thing is happening right now, but nobody's looking at it from that perspective. Why do we need doctors? Why do we need engineers? We need a continuous supply of people that can cure the sick, that can make new buildings, that can make new machinery. That's the only thing that's being looked at. But the social issues of life, the social issues that exist in every society is never approached, ever. And the only people who have the capability to do that are people who immerse themselves into social sciences at an early age just to understand social issues, to make sure that they can contribute to a society in a more healthy, functional way, rather than just being another pillar in society.
Yeah, look, I think when we talk about social sciences and subject combinations, you see that a number of students doing A-levels and their combinations, still, I mean, I'm not talking about schools where you see a certain demographic, I'm talking about masses, in general. There is this mindset which is quite rife that if you are a boy doing A-levels, you ought to do hard sciences. And if you cannot do hard sciences, then you better do accounting and maths and business studies or maybe economics. Getting into things like art, psychology, sociology is still in many cases looked down upon.
Right.
What are you going to do by studying literature? What are you going to achieve by studying sociology and psychology? Sometimes parents have those concerns because they want the child to get into their family business and they think that those subjects will be of absolutely no help, which I totally disagree with, of course. And sometimes the students themselves are wired like that, and that's simply the kind of conditioning they've got at home.
Yeah. I feel like the sad part about this is that the end point for this, why students are basically conditioned like this at home, is because parents are more worried about the financial status. Their question at the end of the day is, humanities mein jaake kya hasil karoge tum? And I was asked the same question by my parents when I said I wanted to go into journalism, and I was told by my brother that, listen, there's no scope. What are you going to do? You're going to get no money. And I think for students in our society, people in a lot of different colleges, there's that point of grandeur that they need to have money. Money is everything to them. And contributing to anything is considered to be a waste of their time. That's why if you see anyone going into arts and sciences, you know for a fact that their parents are not agreeing with it at all. There is a tiny ounce of them that goes, I don't like the fact that my child's in sciences, not in sciences. I want them to be in sciences. Because there's that level of respect and that level of grandeur that comes as you progress along in uni. I think, in an essence, this thing about external rewards that are used as, I feel like they're pawns to make sure students don't step out of line. So there's that Best Student of the Year award by the end of the year or something, and these small tiny things just to entice students to continue to work harder and not work smarter. What do you think?
Hassan, I believe you're very right in saying that these external rewards motivate the students, but we have to ask the fundamental question first as to why they are in place. Now, schoolwork itself is so boring and mundane and routine and standardized that students don't get satisfaction out from it.
Sure.
So you need these external rewards to motivate the students to perform out there. Agar ye nahi honge, to they will just die out. They will just wilt away. So these external rewards motivate the students. And I would like to point out over here that we have to think about the whole structure of society as well. How is that linked to the education system?
Mm-hmm.
Now these external rewards are translating into external rewards later on at the workplaces as well. Because unfortunately, work in capitalist society is also boring and mundane and routine and standardized. So you need the trip to Bahamas with your family, you need the utility bills being paid for by the company, you need all those fringe benefits because capitalist work itself is so boring and mundane and routine.
Absolutely.
It is so standardized. So these external rewards, this is the correspondence between the education system in place and the capitalist economy that the global world functions in. So that's the correspondence actually out there. It's there. The external rewards at the school are translated later on into the external rewards at the workplace.
I agree. So what do you think?
But I think that's a very valid point. But I just feel that if you look at recent developments, this whole very idealistic approach towards life that do these subjects, get a good undergraduate degree, get into a firm, get into a company, and then the relationship with the company is basically going to solve all your problems. That will be the ultimate answer for all your questions in life, because you will make enough money, you will be able to pay your bills, and you will be able to raise a family and be a successful breadwinner for them. I think a lot of it is now changing. I was just reading an article on how fast the gig economy is growing. It's happening in India, so it's happening right next door.
Yeah.
And I don't think it will take too long for it to come here. I think what really creates an advantage in the neighboring country is exposure to IT. And it is that exposure which suddenly opens up a lot more avenues, and it makes them see that there are so many other possibilities.
Yeah.
When you look at a standard student here coming from, let's say, a middle income household, I don't blame them for thinking the way they are thinking, because they are parents in a number of cases who have made a huge effort in terms of finances, in terms of many other things, to put their child into the Cambridge system. Because clearly that's not the legacy, right? They are a product of the local system, and they do not want their children to have the same trajectory.
Yeah.
So they are doing all of that only to make sure that their children have a better future than them. And for them still, a better future still means getting a strong degree, getting into a good company, and doing a job. They are not looking at self-employment, they are not looking at creativity, they are not looking at so many other possibilities which exist, but they are simply not on the menu because of lack of exposure.
Absolutely.
And I would say in most cases lack of exposure to information technology, because it can create so many possibilities. It can actually revolutionize the way we live. It is still revolutionizing.
It is.
But that exposure is still very limited.
Yeah. It's quite funny to me how most parents think that if their child doesn't go through the local system here, then if they go through the Cambridge system or any other system, they're held to another level of, I feel like there's a superiority complex made. And it's funny how they don't know the detriments of that. Now, when I took pre-med subjects in O-levels, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. What I didn't gauge at that time was that I couldn't be a doctor anywhere but here. If I did want to be a doctor anywhere but here, if I wanted to go to med school anywhere but here, I needed to be filthy rich. Which obviously, I don't hold that financial status. Alike with a lot of other students who don't hold that financial status. And majority of the students who go through the metric system here, they are the ones who get into AKU, they're the ones who get into Dow and Ziauddin and a lot of other institutions, great institutions. And then you see people like us who go through that entire rigor of A2 just to realize by the end of the year, by the end of A2, that we should have gone into the metric system. If we wanted to do medicine, we should have gone through the metric system. Now it's ridiculous the amount of money we've spent, the amount of effort we've put, the amount of stress we've taken. It's all pointless because by the end, it's just our A-level grade combined with the tests that we have to take for the universities. And the syllabus for those universities and the test syllabus for that university is the same as the metric system.
Hassan, may I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 18.
You're 18. Wonderful. Can you imagine how many people who are made to realize or who realize it themselves that by going through a local system they will spend far less money, they will put in far less effort, and yet they will have a higher chance of getting into a medical school, right? How many of them are capable of doing what you're doing? How many of them have the exposure? How many of them have the confidence to do what you're doing? You're doing a fantastic job sitting here. And if I, just go back, say, 28 years, right? When I was your age, I couldn't speak English. I'm not kidding. I could not, string a logical sentence together, seriously. And I had to work very hard to do what I'm doing right now. And that's a completely separate journey. But what I'm trying to say is that yes, you have a very valid point that students who go through the local system can actually get into the same colleges that people who do A-levels, but they miss a big journey and they miss a big experience and they end up missing out on a big exposure.
True.
And that's what I see. End of the day, you have two skill sets: your expression, your language, and your ability to understand the world in a mathematical way, in some cases. And if those two skill sets are with you, I don't think there is anything that can stop you from venturing into any territory, no matter how uncharted it might seem.
I agree. Do you think that there's educational malpractice perpetrated by colleges and schools?
In what sense?
In a sense that there's a hierarchy of subjects. There's that keeping one student above the other, giving them more priority, more importance, basing them on their IQ level instead of their EQ level.
Well, we have to remember over here that yes, traits such as docility, passivity are very much sought out in students.
Yeah.
Creativeness is questioned. Intellectual curiosity is questioned.
I would say shot down.
It is shot down. And there's a study by Marxist Bowles and Gintis in capitalist America. And they did the study on a high school in America with 237 students in their sample. And they found out that traits of docility and passivity were reflected later on in good evaluations by the counselors and the teachers themselves, while your questioning ability was shot down, as you put it in the right way. Your curiosity, your intellectual ability, that was not encouraged. Your ability to ask questions is not there out there in the education system today. And just to link back to the previous question you asked as well, Hassan, as Sajjad pointed out, what you're doing right now, it reflects on your cultural capital. It reflects on the possession of the dominant culture of society which students in the OA levels have.
Spot on.
Which they possess. How many of the students in matriculation and inter would know about Shakespeare's poetry? या फैज़ अहमद फैज़ का कलाम पढ़ा होगा, या they would know about Beethoven's symphonies. They wouldn't know about these things, and this cultural capital helps you in the educational system later on at universities as well. because this possession of the dominant culture of society, it's translated into knowledge and power later on in the education system as well as in the society. So this your privileged background or your class, your social class, it translates into more wealth and power, unfortunately, in the society. And this is a circular process.
Yeah.
And it just carries on like that. It just carries on like that.
Right.
So the possession of the dominant culture, it's out there. The cultural capital of A-level students is quite high as compared to those coming in from matriculation.
True. But I think that's quite subjective, because what I was looking at was students going into pre-med. So the metric system pre-med students, they basically have the same end game as I do. So my end game was MBBS or BDS, still is. Now, my background would account for some things if I was in commerce or if I was in humanities, because then I'd be going into a pathway where I can express those traits and the qualities that I possess, which stand to be different from the ones in the metric system, because they can help me in those areas. But as a medical student, or as an intern, as a resident, as a consultant in the future, none of those traits would help me. None of them.
So you're implying that none of your cultural capital would help you in your university years?
I'm afraid it wouldn't, but that's up to interpretation. I feel like in certain small situations it would. I mean, getting in a good word with the dean of surgery or something, but that would be about it. I have, in a lot of situations, come across people a lot older than me, and I've been able to hold a conversation with them. I've been able to talk about things that I genuinely find difficult talking about with people my age. And it's really, I feel verbally chastised, because I've taken MCAT classes and I've heard some of the most redundant things in my life, and I didn't think I'd ever come across people to hear that. I thought as much as I heard from people in A-levels, that would be the benchmark. But there's a benchmark much worse than that. The difference between being intellectually awake that exists with me and that exists with the people in metric, that doesn't just exist between me and them. That also exists between people in A-levels as well. And the sad thing is that people in this college and people in colleges like Gulshan and not so recognized colleges, they aren't aware of anything, because majority of us, we take sciences.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
This is, the point I had made earlier, that there is this growing concern where we see people who have done A-levels and in many cases have passed A-levels with decent grades.
Yeah.
But their skill, their ability is nowhere near.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not reflected by their academic achievement. It's not reflected by their credentials. And I personally think that's where the fault lies with the curriculum and with the requirements, with the eligibility and with the whole process.
Absolutely.
So if you look at it, some years ago, English General was compulsory, right? It's now been thrown out of the window because it's an AS qualification. Almost no schools offer English General, right? To do well in A-level subjects, you need a certain skill set. I'm on the Cambridge panel, and the first thing I've suggested is that people who do A-levels, regardless of what combination they do, it should be mandatory for them to do a module which is half English and half math, so at least certain skills are given to them.
Yeah.
And they will actually help them, though indirectly, but more effectively than any other conscious effort made in the same direction, to do well in theory subjects and also to do well in quantitative subjects. I have people sitting in my economics class who cannot understand what is meant by rate of change. I have people sitting in my class who will not be able to tell that if a value of 10 goes down to 8, is it a 25% change or a 20% change, because they're still confused about whether it's a 2 on 10 in 200 or it's a 2 on 8 in 200, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for the love of God, you're doing A-level economics,
Yeah.
right? So, that's what I'm saying, right? Someone who has no skill set, Cambridge knows it. Who hasn't passed O-levels, Cambridge knows it, with a decent level of achievement. And Cambridge is allowing them, which is why schools is allowing them, right? If Cambridge said, sorry, people cannot come into A-levels if they don't have this much,
Yeah.
right? Will any school be able to take them? No. That's why I say this market is extremely exaggerated and inflated because of commercial objectives.
Yeah.
And academic objectives are being marginalized and are being sidelined. And I think it is if I were Cambridge, I would step into this, because end of the day, it is going to really taint my brand name.
Exactly.
It is going to churn out, a massive force of people with CAIE certificates who know nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Right.
it's my retail image on the line, right, in the end. But there doesn't seem to be a concern, because the focus is on revenue generation from AS, from A2 registrations, from resit registrations, and the fact that the market has doubled essentially because people think that quit local system, come into Cambridge, and you will have lots of problems solved.
Yeah. I feel like that stands to be an issue. But the way the schooling system doesn't step into it at all. I mean, they're the moderator between Cambridge and the students, aren't they? They're meant to explain this to us. Yeah, they're the ones who are just forwarding everything towards us. There's no translation, there's no moderation, there's no understanding of, okay, this is this. What do you think? Do you want this or not?
You just said malpractice, right?
Yeah.
As a conscientious school, when someone comes in with an application and says, I want to do math, physics, and say something else, and you look at their O-level grades, you know right away they can't do them. Why do you still take them? Okay, Cambridge isn't doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Why do you? Are you not smart enough to realize that you are putting them on a road, which has basically nothing for them in the end. So why are you doing that? Sometimes people come and I tell parents that, you know what, if this were my child and I were you, I would make them resit their O-levels. Also, understand that there's a huge math phobia in our country.
Yeah.
People do O-level math, learn some tricks, learn some shortcuts, they pass math, they will burn their math book, tear it, throw it in the dustbin, and they will think, since I'm not doing engineering, I will not be needing math anymore.
Yeah.
They don't understand math has become the lingo of social sciences.
Yeah.
If you call yourself, a good professional sociologist, right, to convert your observations and conjectures into professional research, you will need to back it up with primary data and empirical proof.
Yeah.
How on earth a sociologist can claim that in this country there is a high correlation between unemployment and suicide unless you have the primary data and you have run the statistical programming to prove it?
Factual backing, obviously.
Right.
It's needed.
Otherwise, it's just a conjecture.
Absolutely.
And don't you need to understand the biases in data collection, the methods of data collection, the research methodology? Isn't all of that math? Isn't all of that stats? And people are told, oh, बच्चे को मैथ्स पढ़नी नहीं है तो आप क्यों परेशान हो रहे हैं उसके O-level मैथ्स के ग्रेड के बारे में?
Absolutely. It's like they're passive themselves. They get to a point where they're just agreeing with the student. Okay.
I don't blame parents as much because some of the parents don't have the exposure.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say people who are giving admissions, they should know.
They should know. They should be held accountable for this, because majority of the times, most students, they're just given what they ask for, and colleges just want the students in for the recognition, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Before concluding, I would like to ask you one question, genuinely, seriously. Can we do better?
I think we can do better. It entails rewiring, reprogramming the system. It would also entail a huge sacrifice, because you will have to change the rules of the game. You will have to take right type of students into right types of subject areas. You need to understand their potential. You need to analyze them. I think a lot more focus needs to go into counseling, and I think in terms of the basic skill sets which are required to do well in A-levels subject areas like language and basic math skill sets, they need to be introduced, and they need to be not just introduced as formality, they need to be taken seriously. I know that after English General went out, some schools introduced core modules. Great idea, but I don't think they have achieved what they were really targeting to achieve by introducing those modules, because they were not taken that seriously, because everyone knows there's no exam in the end. So yes, I think students, parents, educators, teachers, we all need to play our part and come to a new model and come to a consensus of about how to revamp this.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, we just need to get beyond this A to C economy of school grades and school position being evaluated on the number of aesthetics they produce or the number of B's and C's they come up with. There is a strength in every child, and we need to just find that strength out and cater to that and lead him towards that path which will help him internalize himself, which will let him internalize those skills, which will let him seek knowledge that is intrinsically satisfying for that person. So ये जो हमारी rat race है between teachers, in between schools, in between celebrity teachers and in between students, ये A to C economies की preoccupation जब तक ख़त्म नहीं होगी, we can't fix the system.
Absolutely.
We can't fix the system, and we can't be coming up with people who solve society's problems. Pakistan has a lot of problems, and those are social problems as well. We need good people with brains behind, with analysis in their work, who come up with solutions to these problems, these fundamental questions that are out there.
I agree. I just think there's a huge lack of those people around, and they're needed the most. I personally believe that the purpose of an educationist isn't just to pass on or transfer knowledge. They're supposed to impart wisdom alongside that. They need to give someone who doesn't have a sense of direction a sense of direction. They need to show them where they go wrong and not penalize them for the mistakes they made. Every person is allowed a certain amount of mistakes. But alongside that, you need to teach them what's right and wrong. And right and wrong doesn't have to always be moral. It has to be with things that you don't really have a full grasp of. I never had a full grasp of math. I could never do math. I got a C in my O-level math. And I still don't know how to do math. I still can't do O-level math. Because I never had anyone who sat me down and taught me everything. I had many people who taught me everything A to C. Nobody showed me how I could practically use this, or where I could really use my mental capacity with math.
Because there's a clean divorce between what is taught and what happens in real world.
Yeah.
And that divorce has been created by our system. It's not that it exists on its own.
Yeah.
When students feel that they cannot understand and relate what they're studying to a real world situation, that's where they disengage. That's where they switch off. And when it happens on a larger scale, that's where shortcuts, notes, emphasis on grade, 2-month crash course, these kind of things will creep into the system. And when they start bearing results, those who were denying it and those who were not for it will actually start feeling foolish for working hard all year round.
Yeah.
Right? It creates a negative incentive, essentially.
Yeah. I just feel like we really need to change this around. We definitely need to change this around, because it's getting to a point where the people who have a different approach on education aren't given that inch towards it. And people really need to change. The education system really needs to change. because it's unfair on the people who want to do sciences but can't do sciences just because of the system, who want to do humanities but can't do humanities just because of the system.
One more thing I'd like to point out is that people hit, strides in academics at different stages. So if at 15 you are not able to understand math well, doesn't mean that you will not be able to do math well.
Exactly.
It could be that your stride will come a year later. It could also be that you have been taught in a manner which was not, agreeing with you.
Yeah.
As simple as that. Doesn't mean that you lack brains to understand math or do well in math. So we have to obviously stop compartmentalizing people, putting them through molds, and if they don't fit in, they just become, useless for us, and we, chuck them. So, but that requires a lot of flexibility in the system, and we don't have that flexibility, right? You need to put 40 people, 35 people in a classroom and teach them in a way, right? Obviously, a teacher cannot have multiple pitches when he's teaching 40 people so that each one of them understands. He has to create a mid-range pitch.
Yeah.
The people who will benefit most will be who are on that, or a little up and down. But people who are significantly deviating will be losers.
Absolutely. I feel like there's a lot of comparison with that being a moderator for 40 plus students in a classroom. That kind of fits in with the factory model of education, isn't it? Because one person trying to impart that same knowledge to the same people just because they learn the same thing, thinking that they'll understand the same thing.
Right.
But what one student will understand sitting in the front row is not the same as one student sitting in the final row. It won't be the same. I remember I was in from nursery up until 5th grade, and all I remember is, and I'm not pointing out, I'm not I'm not firing shots at any college or any school right now, or I'm just saying that the system's been conditioned that way. I was always that nosy kid. I always wanted to ask questions that nobody else would ask. When we were in 4th grade, we were doing geography, and we were learning about Norway's way of making milk and cheese. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
My question was, why are we learning this? Why can't we learn about our country right now?
Yeah.
How do we make milk and cheese? Where does all-purpose come from? Where does the stuff that we use come from? And I was grilled to hell and back for that. I remember being in 5th grade, and we were learning about Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. I had a archival book at home. Like my parents loved collecting books and loved reading up on a lot of this. And I remembered, hey, I have a book at home. Why don't I just bring it to school the next day and show it to people? Like, and we can get a better grasp of what the Sistine Chapel was, because all we had in our textbooks was a crude drawing of it. Yeah. And that doesn't really sit well with a lot of students. I mean, if you see the actual thing, it's a lot better. And at that time, we didn't have technology. A teacher couldn't pull out her phone and show it to us. So I bought that book. Not only did it have the Sistine Chapel, but it had lewd renderings of sculptures that were in essence nude. Now, a 12-year-old would not have a promiscuous mind to bring that over. The entire thing was blown out of proportion, and I was skewered by the principal just because I brought that book over. And I felt like I was at fault, because I tried to do something for everyone. I tried to take it a step further, and I was put 20 steps behind just because of making that one step forward. And I realized that if I ever tried to do that, it wouldn't sit well with the teacher, it wouldn't sit well with the system, it wouldn't sit well with me by the end. And throughout life, I've experienced it with teachers in A levels, with teachers in O levels, and ultimately I gave up on it until now, because I feel like it's unfair if I give up on it just because it happened to me. I need to make a change. I need to make sure that some people get the information that they require to move forward. Don't sit back and think, okay, the person who has the chalk knows everything. I won't do anything. Everything's in their hands. That's the fault that students have, that they place their entire future, their entire security into the teacher's hands. And they don't know what they're talking about either. Well, this has been one of the most enlightening conversations I've had. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to sit here and talk to you, talk to him.
Likewise.
Likewise, Sajjad. It was a pleasure to be your first host.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you. I hope to have you guys again.
Thank you so much.
That was the end of the first one. Stay tuned.